Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today on Mastering Fundraising, we have the opportunity to take a deep dive into the stories, strategies, structures that shape exceptional fundraising results. And our guest is Victor Martin, Vice President for University Relations for the University of Puget Sound. And under his leadership, the university has brought together marketing, communications, and advancement into a single centralized structure, which aligns brand storytelling with philanthropy, stewardship, and in community engagement. And in this episode, we're going to explore how this integrated approach helps Puget Sound tell stories that highlight the impact of giving, celebrate donors, and connect the university community around shared purpose. And Victor is also going to share some insights on how fundraisers and communications professionals can collaborate more effectively to elevate messaging, inspire generosity, and build deeper relationships with donors. So hang on, this is going to be a great conversation. Victor, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Chris. With that intro, now you've raised the bar pretty high. I feel like I should have prepared maybe even more than I did so I can make this engaging for your viewers and listeners.
Yes, I have no idea if you were a high jumper in high school or anything like that, but I do know you are consistently able to jump over high bars professionally. So we're going to get into it, and I'm excited to learn from you. We've known each other a long time, and I've always found opportunities to learn and grow from your expertise. And what I want the audience to know is a little bit more about you. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your leadership journey in the nonprofit space.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, we have known each other a long time. It's been almost 20 years now. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
Which is when I got started in the nonprofit space. I started as a fundraising consultant of all things, which was shocking to me because I didn't really know the first thing about fundraising when I started.
Right.
And I started with CCS fundraising, had this wonderful opportunity to work on a campaign in Chicago. And, as I mentioned, I didn't really know much about philanthropy. I was a first generation college student. I went to school on scholarship and state and federal aid. I didn't really understand the concept of giving. So there were a couple of hurdles for me. One is to just get acclimated into the world. And two was then to start believing in it and trying to inspire others to consider giving themselves. But it turned out to be a wonderful experience and has become a wonderful career. I had the wonderful opportunity to work on several campaigns, both as, a staff member and then to lead other campaigns, which also taught me a lot along the way. And, there was a point at which, I don't remember exactly when, I realized this is your career now. This is what you do. And so after that, I transitioned out of the consulting world just to kind of stay and live and work in one place in Southern California. I transitioned into higher ed. I started in a director of development role, worked on several great projects for a university, eventually became associate vice president of development, and then interim vice president, and ultimately vice president there. I did that for about 6 years as vice president, and then was fortunate enough to secure the role that I'm in now at University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. I've been vice president for university relations for the last 3.5 years, and I love it. I love it here. I love the university. It's just been a wonderful experience.
That's awesome. Well, there's lots to love up there for sure. Um, and I'd be interested to kind of identify with you your favorite professional role. And I don't mean by, title, but the kind of leadership element that you like the most, in your professional work. Could be mentor, strategist. I don't know. Tell me what is that kind of role and why is it so meaningful to you?
Yeah, thanks. Strategist is an interesting question. I actually really like working one-on-one with donors. Some of the most impactful or meaningful experiences I've had have been when a donor wants to make a gift to celebrate something. And I can think of a woman who lost her child, actually, who was the first graduate of a specific program that had been launched at my previous university. And it was a delicate situation, as you might imagine, but working on the strategy and working in partnership with her uh, to ultimately secure an endowment gift to support students pursuing that same line of education was remarkable and impactful and inspiring and something that I still pull on today. I love doing the strategy work, but as you can imagine, as a vice president, it's not all one-on-one donor work. There are lots of other things, helping
Right.
lead a university. I serve as a mentor, I think informally to members of my team and people at the university, but also in a formal way as a member of AFP in the South Sound. I think I probably like that best because I'm not the smartest person in the room. I never will be. I don't have all the answers, but I think helping people wayfind through their journey in the nonprofit space is something that either I can assist with directly, given my experience of entering this world and not knowing what in the world I was doing,
Right.
or connecting them with people in my professional network, which I just love doing, seeing people find the place where they feel most at home if they aren't currently in that situation or navigating a difficult work challenge or a donor situation. It's fun to just be candid and share stories, both of my successes and failures. But I also love leading my team too. I think I apply a certain sense of humor and humbleness to my approach that seems to resonate with my team, unless they're just lying to me.
No, I'm sure that they appreciate your authenticity.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Well, let's move on to the question of mentors. You talked about the education that you had to find to understand the why behind philanthropy and the how in terms of fundraising. Who were some of these mentors that kind of helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So many people have helped me along the way, but I think when I first started in this journey, I started at CCS in Chicago. There was a guy named Kevin Cherup that was a fantastic mentor to me. We just kind of resonated from the start. We both
Mhm.
had fathers who were machinists and came from similar backgrounds, and he entered that world not really knowing much about philanthropy as well. And I think right away we kind of clicked. When I was in Southern California, I can think of Chris Frank, who was the CEO of a Chamber of Commerce. And although it was a little bit different line of work, it was really interesting to work with a seasoned leader who could have a candid conversation with me before a meeting. Then we'd go out on a donor meeting together, and then we would debrief after. And so to hear someone at that level with that much experience and
Right.
see what they were thinking, what they were going through was so impactful.
That's great.
Now I've got Dondi Cup at Seattle Children's, who's been a great mentor and friend. And it's always nice in our world. I don't know if we talk about this enough, but to have a safe space to bounce ideas off of
Great.
one another, especially with somebody who's going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
guess lastly, I'd say my father inspired me, with a work ethic. He was just somebody who didn't work in philanthropy. He was a machinist, as I mentioned, but his work ethic was incredible. And so I draw on that all the time. And I have to mention my team. This is the other thing. Not in a formal way, but I try to listen more than I talk, although that might be a little reversed during the course of this podcast. But I learned so much from watching these fun, creative, passionate people do their thing and come up with great ideas. And they mentor me in as much a ways or as many ways as I try and lead and inspire them.
Right, right. I think it's funny that you mentioned the fact that you're doing a lot of talking now, but you're excused. This is a podcast. We expect you to talk. I know normally you're a very strong listener,
Yes.
and maybe sometime we'll find a time to take a poll in the office to figure out if it's true or not. But I believe it is.
At least
Um,
I'm claiming it today.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So you're 20 plus years into your leadership work, your fundraising work, um, plus. And what I'd love to kind of know from you if you've developed a bit of a philosophy around leadership, or if you have characteristics that you believe in. I think you started hitting on a few of those when you talked about the way that you lead with your team, et cetera, et cetera. Being a good listener is a great one. But what are some of the leadership traits, characteristics, or philosophies that you have when you think about your own leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think trust is really paramount. I've hired or inherited and continued to develop a good team of senior leaders, and I think we have to trust each other. We have to know we're headed toward the same goal, and I try to establish that through two things primarily transparency, because these are fundraisers and excellent communicators, and they're going to see through it if I'm, trying to wash over something.
Right.
And I think it's a delicate balance because there's, lots of information and you have to decide when and what to share things. But I try to be as transparent as I'm absolutely allowed to be. And I think that helps establish that trust. And the other thing for me is a sense of humor. I can't help but joke around and be lighthearted, even when sometimes topics are a bit challenging. Not to diminish them, but I think it's my natural way of reminding people that we're still in this together, even if we have some hurdles in front of us.
Right.
And
Right.
there's a way to take the work seriously, but not to take ourselves too seriously. And that's just the way that I approach things. And, much like you're going to take a poll in your office, I suppose you could take a poll in my team. I think it works fantastically. I hope that they would say that it works well too. But, in all seriousness, I think that's been very resonant with the people that I've worked with over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really great. I think trust, sense of humor are incredibly valuable and important, obviously, and you've locked into that, and I'm sure your team members would agree. So let's move on to the topic for today, the fundraising topic for today. And to set the stage, why don't you tell us about the decision to integrate marketing and communications directly into the advancement division at the college? Um, what problem were you trying to solve, and what were the opportunities that this created?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting at University of Puget Sound, actually. I had been hired, but then there was a few months before I was actually going to move up to Washington from California. So there's this transition period where I was in regular contact with the president of the university, and he would call me about things he thought I needed to know in advance of my
Mhm.
arrival. One of the things was that the former vice president for communications, who was a cabinet member herself, had gone out on leave and was headed toward retirement. And so it was kind of circumstantial in many ways. But as this idea came up, he knew about my background, having marketing communications as a VP for advancement at another university. And he floated the idea by me before I ever arrived. And I jumped at the chance enthusiastically and said, I think it's a fantastic idea. In fact, long term, that's what I would have wanted. And, he kind of chuckled and figured I would say as much and adored the former VP. There was nothing but good work done between the two of them. But I think he appreciated the approach that I would bring to it. And so I agreed. And then on day one, essentially the two teams merged. It did present some challenges, though, because then and now till this day, we are housed in two different locations. There just
Mm,
isn't enough room for the entire team in one space.
right.
So marketing communications is in a building kind of out on their own, even though, they're still on campus. And the rest of university relations, we call it, or advancement, is in another building. So it presents its challenges that I work through on a regular basis, and I'm happy to talk through how I handle some of that. But it did create opportunities, as you asked, where we could maybe more emphatically tell the stories of our student success, our faculty and staff success, and do it in boastful ways maybe that they weren't used to, particularly weaving in stories about philanthropy's impact on students, faculty, and staff and supporting our mission. And that's kind of the approach that I've taken since my arrival.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. How has having a unified Marcom and advancement team sort of changed the way your institution approaches storytelling? I heard you say that you perhaps get to brag a little bit more strongly and weave in the fundraising element of how that came about because of that is but how are the other ways that storytelling has changed?
Well, I think we think about elevating our profile pretty universally now. So, in the ways in which we tell our stories, particularly to external audiences, we have that aim of elevating the profile, highlighting the power and impact of giving. And we're also thinking about the ways in which external audiences broadly consume this that might not be so affiliated with the university. So you take prospective students and their families. Can we tell a story in a way that doesn't seem all donor centric or all impact centric or all attract new people to the university centric? Can we tell it in a way that it's kind of evergreen and can be used across these different teams as they meet with people, whether they're donors or alumni or prospective students and families? And I think looking through that lens has changed the ways in which we're telling stories in some obvious ways, as you might imagine, and some non-obvious ways. So, I mean, I can give you an example of something that we just did. We had updated the logo, and so Grizz is our mascot, and Grizz, who's like this grizzly bear, right?
Mhm.
Um, we had gone through kind of a brand unification and refresh. And when we upgraded that logo or when we enhanced it, it looked decidedly different than the mascot. I mean, you could tell they were both the same, but not exactly that close. And we thought, well, this is an opportunity um, to take a new approach. That mascot has been in place 20 years. The costume is weathered a little bit, and it doesn't closely match, right? So we went through all the internal processes of talking to the people and the stakeholders as we did, but then we created this fun persona around Grizz and created a story for, this mascot that maybe hadn't been told in as much detail as before. And so we hid Grizz for a little while and didn't have the mascot at things over the summer or anything like that. Now, it's while we're transitioning out the old and trying to bring in the new, right? And during this 2 month period of time, we did a whole social media campaign, and it started to engage people that beyond the 20 years or the past 20 years of knowing who Grizz was, alumni from years prior to that. And it was met with some trepidation, right? I mean,
Sure.
some people were like, what are you going to do with the mascot? But we had so much fun with it. We've got a brilliant social media and digital content manager who's a recent grad. And he, in partnership with others, kind of led this effort. And it allowed us to re-engage some folks that had worked on the original mascot and bringing that to life. Um, but it also allowed us to be fun and silly and also meaningful ultimately in unifying the brand. And so we hid Grizz. We had him working out and doing things where you only saw profile views or the back of him. He was at the library reading books and doing all kinds of stuff to come out with his new look. And then he was unveiled at homecoming. And it's been one of our most popular stories of the year. So
Oh, good.
it's things like that that we're able to do, or things like that that we're able to do when we're thinking about trying to engage a broad range of constituents for a variety of purposes. That's the external audience piece. I think, storytelling is also important for our internal audiences, and having marketing communications also comes with drafting speeches and annual addresses for the president.
Right.
And that becomes really important too. Back to this whole idea of evergreen material. When we're drafting the president's address for the year, of course, informed by him and in line with the strategic plan and all those things, but we draft it in such a way, thinking about the editorial calendar for the year and knowing that we also produce the president's annual report at the end of it. So the things he outlines first to these internal audiences, we should be prepared to provide updates in fun storytelling ways along the way, and then recap it all in the annual report at the end of the year.
Okay.
Those are the kinds of things that we're doing looking through this lens. And not to say they weren't being done before, but certainly the team is really well integrated in thinking about this all year long.
Yeah, yeah. And that word holistic feels appropriate. Certainly seems like you're able to look at things more holistically, elevating the brand, the awareness, the visibility of the university, while also making sure that there aren't silos, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was a challenge. And I'm just so glad to hear that a brand logo kind of refresh or change didn't go the way of Cracker Barrel, which maybe you should have given some guidance and advice to that group before they introduced to the world that change. But it's
No kidding.
fascinating. Yeah,
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 there's always that risk when you're making changes, and especially in this environment at a storied institution like University of Puget Sound, and I don't think we're unique in this space. People are averse to some terms even. So like the term brand, right? That's a marketing term. And it's been a process to get here, but one that we've really focused on collaboration and getting buy-in from stakeholders as not to go the way of Cracker Barrel, as you state.
yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring up risk, and you took a risk. You took a very calculated, maybe risk there, but a risk nonetheless. And it'll be a topic for another podcast, I think, just how you embrace risk and not let it stand in the way of doing the work that you know needs to be done. Because often, I think this kind of risk would have been seen as too significant, and maybe you wouldn't have tackled it, and you would have missed an incredible opportunity to raise the profile of the university. So
Yeah.
it's an exciting story to share. I'd love for you also to kind of share some stories of impact. Maybe an example, if you can think of one, where philanthropy, donor impact, and community engagement kind of got woven together in your university's communication strategy? Is there a good example you can share?
Yeah, I mean, first I'd say that's where I started. I had Zoom meetings with the marketing and communications team before I ever arrived once I learned that we'd
Okay.
be integrating. And I said, I have a philosophy on this. I think that you should be able to look at any one of our stories and pull several, if not all of these elements out of it in some way. It doesn't have to be overt, but you have to be able to find this kind of through line through that. And that's focusing on student success, faculty and staff success, community engagement and overall impact, and that would include alumni engagement and how philanthropy helps support that or make it possible or is spurred because of the story that we're telling. And we really should be thinking about that in all of our communications and putting it on our editorial calendar for the year and
Right.
thinking about the different milestones, particularly if you're involved in fundraising campaigns or certain initiatives are going to launch or end at a certain time. Let's try and tell these stories again so that anybody on my team can use them. The stewardship folks, the frontline development folks, the alumni engagement people, the president can share links to these stories as a follow-up with someone he's met with. And for example, something that we've done is like commencement and year-end storytelling. We had a number of different stories related to commencement, and now it's about celebrating the success and the achievements and the stats of, let's say, our graduates of 2025. But it was also about commencement itself, the importance of that milestone and matriculation into meaningful employment, graduate work,
Mhm.
volunteer service, whatever our students choose to do, and then highlighting how philanthropy made some of those things possible. So, did many of those students attend and be able to achieve this milestone because of scholarships that had been endowed by donors? And so I think that was, one thing that we certainly do. And then, of course, we take pictures of it. We have a beautiful stewardship report that we provide to our donors, and the cycle continues. There's tons of community engagement stories in there because we have so many events in and around commencement that we highlighted as well. But maybe a separate community engagement story is we have a kind of a conference and events services division, as most places do. And so we work closely with them to bring in external partners to use our facilities when they're not in use for our primary mission.
Right.
And one of the things that happened recently is we had a local election, and the candidates that were running for mayor and city council positions and those kinds of things were in partnership with our Chamber of Commerce, which we work very closely with. They were looking for a host site for a debate. They chose us as a partner in that work. We had our team there writing a story about it. The chamber had their team there writing a story. We invited local media, and this story ends up getting published after we, did some work with pitching. It ended up getting picked up by Yahoo News, and that was huge for us in terms of brand awareness, but also in terms of just highlighting the ways in which we are engaged with our local community. We
All
always
right.
want to be seen as a partner, the cultural hub of the region, if you
There you
will.
go. Yeah.
It's as important as anything else we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Way to tie that in. So you mentioned photography, which is interesting. You mentioned commencement, which comes with all kinds of different publications, I'm sure, whatnot. But I'd be interested in understanding better the specific kind of storytelling approaches um, using channels.
Yeah.
Like, what are the channels that you think about most often in terms of getting that message out, elevating the profile? Like, what are your key channels of communication?
Well, thanks for that, and you've highlighted some of them. I mean, we have an outstanding, don't tell anybody, no one watched this podcast, an outstanding photographer and videographer. Do not come after this person. He is incredible, just lights out. He he just gets what we are doing, and we work very closely with him on approaches to stories. So we do the things everybody does. I mean, we have an alumni magazine that's printed and sent out. It's also put online digitally. We have a weekly newsletter called The Hatchet, and that's been, fantastic for us. We have the President's Annual Report, which I've mentioned, another print and digital publication. But I think what we've done is enhanced our social media to appeal to certain audiences. We've
Yep.
continued to maintain that alumni magazine in hard copy because that appeals to certain audiences. And then what we've done is we've weaved in the stories, this visual storytelling that this photographer, videographer does, um, through the digital forms of communication. We've tried to use video wherever possible. And our social media and digital content manager is great with short videos for social media. I think just putting an emphasis on those things has driven engagement so much. We've been up in engagement year over year the past 3 years since we've
Good.
hired these people, and we're trying to tell our stories in the way that people want to consume them. Some people still read really long articles with black text on a white page. They do.
What?
But a lot of people want to see it, and they
Yeah.
want shorter clips, and they want to get a full experience of the story. And I think it's important. One of the first things I learned in fundraising is put a face to the campaign.
Right.
I can say student, student, student all day long, but if I show you a student, that's going to have more impact on you than me just talking about it.
100%. Yeah. How do you measure whether things are resonating with these internal or external stakeholders? Is there a calculus that you have, or how do you know?
Yeah, there's a calculus. I'll tell you one calculus that I have is our board chair texts me a lot more than she used to, and it's with a lot more compliments than friendly advice as before. And so, as silly as that sounds, that is a great indicator because she has her finger on the pulse of the board of trustees. And if our social media, as distant as some of the content may be from the social media that trustees are consuming on average, if they are pleased with it, I know that it's resonating across generations, across industries,
Good.
and it's working well. Now that's an informal measure that I use, which I appreciate. But we do the same things that you might imagine. I mean, we're looking at the number of likes, views, shares. We're looking at website traffic year over year and month by month. Where are people clicking to? Are they ultimately reading a story and then clicking through to make a gift? Um, and so I think those are, most of the ways that we're evaluating this. And before, we used to just put, let's say our alumni magazine was in print only and then PDF'd and stored on a site, and you couldn't track who was visiting it. We've adjusted that so we print, like slightly smaller quantities, push out digital in different spaces, and then have links to go make a gift or go visit other pages for more information about certain stories. And so we can see what's trending a little bit more closely and what's not.
Perfect. That's great. Um, I think a lot of people would understand and recognize the fact that development professionals, communications professionals often have different rhythms, different goals. What are some of the best practices you've found for kind of aligning the different cultures, approaches, those kinds of things?
Was that kind of a thinly veiled question to say the creatives are kind of hard to wrangle?
Well, yeah, I mean, no, because I've never been one, so I wouldn't know. Yeah, I'm sure that's probably accurate and fair and appropriate because they have talents that most mortals don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you please everybody?
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing, but
Well,
also,
fundraisers are tough too. So it's not as if it's sort of like, oh, the fundraisers are just so easy.
yeah,
I didn't mean that at all because we know they're not. So, but each needs to be served.
yeah, absolutely. No, I get your point, and it is something to think about. I mean, we're coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, different education, different parts of our brain, that are firing at different times, and it is an interesting challenge, although one that I think we've been able to manage pretty well by appreciating and leveraging the tools and the gifts that each person has to offer, and realizing that, me, for instance, I'm never going to be the foremost expert at annual giving. Our director of annual giving is going to be that. I'm not going to be the social media expert. Our social media manager is going to be that. And I think that um, the the important thing is to make sure that we're focusing on our culture. That's our foundation as a unit. We're all there to support each other, to advance the university,
Right.
and to do that and to maintain maybe any culture. It's like any other relationship. It requires a lot of time and care and investment. And I mentioned that our marketing team is housed in a different location on campus. We have to be very intentional about having all staff meetings. As boring as that sounds, podcast listeners, but it actually is something that's worked really well for us, because it's the one time that we can all be in the same space and talk through all of the projects that we're working on. And critically important for us, because we don't have as much water cooler talk as maybe another shop would. Um, I think the other thing that we do is try and infuse of fun into meetings if possible, but also into some regular activities. So, like, our executive director of corporate and foundation relations does team building exercises, and I think we have those monthly. At our last all-staff retreat, they organized a scavenger hunt around campus, and we had to go looking for interesting and little-known facts about the university. But they designed the teams in advance, so they put a member of marketing, a member of
Perfect.
stewardship, a member of development, a member of alumni engagement, and so on, member of advancement services on every team. So you were forced to interact with, engage, and work as a team with people that maybe you didn't work with on a daily basis. And we try to do that all the time. And I also take at least one opportunity, or a member of the senior leadership team does, at every meeting, to highlight how a gift came to fruition by touching the hands of every department on our team. And I think as we continue to tell that story, we've been really functioning in unison, all rowing the same direction, if you will.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's so great. I love that advice. Here's some other advice I'd love to give, and that's how can fundraisers help communicators better understand sort of the donor psychology, and communicators help fundraisers think more strategically about messaging and brand consistency and those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's a good question, something that we focus a lot on, because we have to appreciate each other's work. As silly as it sounds, meeting regularly, infusing some joy into that process, being intentional about highlighting the way, X, Y, or Z only happened because of this function or that person. Um, Collaborating during the creative process as well. So I mentioned the president's annual report a handful of times. That used to just be produced, let's say, with some input from development in terms of, here are some stories we want you to highlight. But now we frame it out together. We talk through what's missing, what should be added. We review both the printed version and the digital version along the way. We share it with a couple of folks as a test. and then we feel like we've produced a product together at the end of the day. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's meaningful work, and I think it's something that we all end up proud of at the end versus I wish that team would listen to me once in a while and do this or that.
Yeah.
That really doesn't tend to happen.
Yeah, that's great. What are the biggest missed opportunities when the two functions operate in silos and aren't connected in the way that you've brought them together? What, if you had to put your finger on the big miss, what is that?
When I first arrived, even though marketing communication had come under our umbrella, our uh, kind of our head of philanthropy, our philanthropy advisor, he came to me a couple of times and he said, "Hey, we're publishing this story about this, the impact of this endowment. Do you think it's okay if I write marketing and ask them to infuse the donor's name here somewhere?"
Yeah.
I said, of course, like you don't have to ask me these things. I mean, needless to say that they don't ask anymore, but it's those kinds of misses where if you're writing and thinking about just telling the story, the impact could be 20 pages on its own without ever telling the origin of it. And I
Yes.
think that it's not rocket science. This is not a novel concept that I'm sharing here, but I think those things were missed, and I think that there's an X factor to this too. When you're operating in silos and you don't know, let's say, Chris, you're making a gift somewhere, and somebody from your same graduating class is working with development and on the cusp of making a gift or thinking about being re-engaged. If you're not mentioned in the process, if the catalyst for your own personal giving and the impact is all told, right? But if some of your story isn't told, you miss out on the opportunity to inspire that classmate that I use as an example. And certainly we've experienced some of that. And we've experienced it in the positive ways where they've come out and said, I was so glad to hear X, Y, or Z person is giving. And they're inspiring me to become more engaged, to volunteer, to, you know, do whatever with my alma mater.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find it hard or challenging sometimes to get people to think of storytelling not just as marketing, but as a form of stewardship, relationship building? Is there a tension there?
I don't think there's a tension anymore. I think at first, when I first arrived, there were more purists, I guess, if I can say that, and no fault of theirs. I mean, they're telling stories in the way that they had been accustomed to telling them. But I think when we, particularly back to your previous questions, like if development staff can share a donor's perspective with those storytellers and say this is what I know them well, I know they would wish for this to happen, or thank you for including them, I shared this story and here's how grateful they are, and this is the note they sent back to the writer. I think those are the kinds of things that can relieve that tension. And it we employ the services, the talents of marketing in almost everything that we do. So like for our annual donor stewardship reports, we have a fantastic donor stewardship team, but they do work closely with the marketing folks because we have designers on that team and they have a different skill set in terms of packaging this at the end of the day. When we get a note back from a donor that says, this is the most remarkable stewardship report I've ever had. The content isn't necessarily different, but you brought it to life in a different way.
Yeah.
I think both teams can appreciate what's happened there.
Yeah, no, that's great. I don't want to take a step backward, but it seems as though in a hospital or healthcare setting, the marketing departments were typically separated from fundraising. And in those cases, the marketing communications people had a specific objective of patient acquisition, for example. It's like we have to get more patients, so we're going to market about how great our doctors are, so more patients will come, that kind of thing. And then separately, the development was like, hey, we have to, attract donors, so we're going to talk about it. And they had very different stories, very different everything. And in the educational setting, I'm sure there historically has been that tension about we need students. We need, we need to get students to come to this university. So we're going to position our marketing communications around that. And then separately, the philanthropy folks would be like, we need donors from alumni and whatnot, right? And so the combination of healthcare advancement, education advancement, I know brought those two together, and that's a big deal, right? Because it's not just one or the other. It's not acquisition and it's not philanthropy only. It's both, and all these other things, community and everything else. And so, um, are you finding that some of that resistance, some of that old school thinking about communications is dying away now, or is it still unique? Or I mean, or is it still kind of special when it happens that they're together?
Well, I was just meeting with several VP counterparts of other liberal arts universities, and I met with many of them. I think there was only one person at another university who, as I was talking to this group of people, had come up to me and said, "We need to exchange information because I have marketing communications as well, and let's bounce ideas off of each other." And his perspective was this was great for us to have, but he didn't have a broad network of others to share thoughts and ideas with because they still remain separated. And I had a separate meeting with, I don't know, 6 or 7 of these folks as we went into a breakout group. And, we went around the table and they said, do you have, who's on your team? And when I said I have marketing communications, the rest of them gasped and they said, oh, thank goodness we don't have that. I so that's anecdotal. I mean, I haven't looked at the data to see how many still maintain
Right.
separate shops or not, but the sense I got, at least in my small corner of the world, is that they still remain separated largely. There isn't uh, so much an issue at my institution because we continue to message that enrollment is important, alumni engagement is important, philanthropy is important, and just overall sharing the success of our students, faculty, and staff and their respective impacts in the communities they serve is important. So I think getting over the hurdle is probably a challenge for some.
Yeah.
Once you're there, you have to feed and water it, like I said. I mean, it takes a lot of work. But once you're there, it's relatively smooth sailing in the sense that if I have an idea as an advancement professional, we can go immediately and affect that change in communication. Or if the president wants to see something particular happen, and he at my institution obviously has the goals of philanthropy being supported and enrollment, we can make that happen really easily without much negotiation. And I work very closely with the VP for enrollment here. So it's all about partnerships. It's all about communication. It's making sure we understand we're in the same, aiming towards the same goal, which we are.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm a huge fan of the integrated model. To your point about it taking food and water and care is probably the most important element because these models can exist separate with great people,
Yeah.
or they can survive or thrive in an integrated way with great people. The key is the great people, right? And I get excited when you can bring together the integrated model with great people because I think it's way more effective, efficient, et cetera, than it would be even having great people with not integrated models being utilized. And I don't know if you have a different opinion about that or share that, but maybe even more important is, well, if integrated models are better, which I assume you feel they are, and great people are necessary, what's the future look like? What's the next stage of growth in your mind? Where are you going to go next?
Yeah, first, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think integrated is absolutely the way to go. I've worked in other spaces where that wasn't the case, and it's like you said, it's more challenging. Things take longer to produce. It seems like there's more compromise, and maybe neither side is as happy with the result.
Yeah,
It's more expensive. Two media buyers. Yeah, I mean, just all kinds of things
you're
that
right.
happen. Maybe
Good
two
point.
software systems that you're working in and inefficient and all kinds of stuff. So to be able to align that, I think you save the institution money, you have exponentially more impact. And to your point, you're not reliant on the great people necessarily. And by that, I mean, I work with person X brilliantly, but guess what? When person X leaves, then we've got to reestablish the whole relationship and process all over again and count on person Y functioning just like the previous person did. And, there's always a question mark there. So I think if you go with form and structure over personnel, that to me is the better way to go. Where do we go from here? Well, I think we have to keep looking on the horizon to see what's next. As I mentioned earlier, digital's become more important for us. Video has become more important based on the way consumers want to, consume this information.
Right.
And so, as I think forward, I'm thinking about, and I hate to say it because it's buzz everywhere now, but AI is probably a next step, even though we're integrating some of that in our communications already. But you've got to have a great foundation, great communication, a great team of people to harness the power of new technologies and do so ethically and responsibly along the way. And let me make this point clear, not to replace people, but to support and enhance the human talent. And, I mean, we were talking to a firm not that long ago talking about the ways in which they're utilizing AI to do their media buys so that it can be real-time ad placements, and they can measure the success or lack thereof and then adjust to an A or B um, type of advertisement or put it in a new place if it's not functioning well. And before we're waiting for, let's say, weekly or bi-weekly reports, and then somebody has to take time out of their day, analyze that, make decisions, get back, and we don't change things as quickly. That didn't replace anyone on my team, to be thinking about this. Rather, it made their work more efficient and theoretically more effective. And that's one of the things we've done in fundraising too. We've just moved into, we're partnering with Givesy version 2 AI, if you know them. But and we're using them as kind of a digital engagement officer, a virtual engagement officer, if you will.
Right.
We have so many alums, so many prospects. I don't have enough people on the team to reach out to them. So
Right.
this tool starts reaching out and touching base and gets them to a point they can hand them off to the human talent that we have, and they can have a personal experience. We're totally clear about who they're working with from the start and all that stuff. But back to close up this whole loop, marketing communications was so integral in the development of our avatar and in the language and the scripting and the brand elements that we put into place when we're using this tool. A development person or an engagement person couldn't have done that on their own. So it's really taken the whole team to do it. And I think that's kind of where we're going as we look toward the future.
No, that's awesome. That's I suppose it's not the case, but it would seem funny if Grizz was your avatar for your development office. You're being outreached to by our newest junior associate in the advancement department, Grizz,
Yeah.
who's excited to meet you.
We had considered that.
I'm sure.
But yeah, we went with Susan Logger because we're the loggers, and Susan actually was the most common name in our database for our alumni and
Oh, that's interesting.
constituents largely. So we thought, oh, that's a common name. It's going to be well received. So I mean, we put tons of thought and effort into
Of
this,
course. That's great.
and we're testing it out now.
Good. No right or wrong answer. Yeah, good. I love that. Well, one last question.
Sure.
If you could give one piece of advice to those fundraising leaders out there looking to elevate their communications and storytelling capabilities, what would your advice be?
I appreciate this question very much. I mean, for what it's worth coming from me, I'd say be honest and transparent in the stories that you tell and focus on the positive and lasting impact that your organization is making, because all of us in the nonprofit space are doing really, really impactful work. So many great things are happening. Our communities are improving through the work that we do. So simply shining a light on the impact and doing it in an authentic way is the best way that I know how to approach this work. And I think all too often, we're all doing this great work. We have these great stories to tell. The miss comes in either the resources that we have or the approach we take to telling those stories. So if we can share those stories, if we can put a face to it, if we can highlight the impact of our work, particularly for people who are, philosophically aligned with your mission or vision, there's a strong chance it's going to resonate with them, and it might be the first opportunity to attract new donors, new students, new patients, whoever you're trying to serve. But doing it in that way, I think it's the approach I'm taking, at least.
I love it. I appreciate that. And it's great advice. And I'm just so grateful to you for sharing so much wisdom with our audience today on this topic of the integrated model of advancement, blending communications and fundraising, which is the right way to go. It's such a powerful way to approach the work that you're doing, but the work that so many nonprofits have to do. So I do hope that the audience has a lot that they can take away. And Victor, I'm just so grateful to you for being such a force for good out there. You have been consistently good and expert over these 20 plus years that I've known you. And I wish we could continue the conversation here. We'll have to find another way to continue the conversation separately. But for today's conversation, today's episode, we're at the conclusion. For the audience, I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this content, I would encourage you to subscribe and like it. And also check out The Nonprofit Edge, another podcast, and Lead for Good, another podcast. All three of them interview extraordinary nonprofit leaders and really dig into some of their expertise so we can all learn together. But for today, we're at the end, and I hope you all come back real soon. We'll see you on the next episode of Mastering Fundraising. Bye, all.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.